Jim, you and Sandy, please do me a big favor. Give the audience a nice thank you and give us an introduction.
Take it away, Sandy.
Well, introducing ourselves.
Yep.
I'm, I'm Sandy Hoover. I am an author and writer with the Corrales Writing Group and using Jim as a collaborator on several projects that we had a really good time writing together. Jim, you're up.
And my name is Jim Tritten. I'm a retired Navy carrier pilot. I live in Corrales, New Mexico, and I have been writing since high school and live here with my wife, who is from Denmark, and she is an accomplished artist and author, and we have 3 cats.
Very nice. Very nice. First off, let me say my hat's off to you, Jim, and thank you for your service, sir. And I do heartfully mean that. My dad was in the military. My older brother and younger brother were both in the military. Me, not so much. But anyway, why don't we talk about the books y'all have written? Sandy, how about you first?
Okay. I think my favorite of the things we have written together is Love and Lies. It has shown up under several names, and then Love and Lies, Call Me Eve is the one that it seems to be permanent. It's a story of love found and lost and refound. And I would say that it's also a little bit of a thriller, trying to figure out how things will work out in the end. Um, we had fun writing it. Jim is frequently reminding me that I don't know how guys talk, especially not when they're with other guys and no females are around. So I use him for the backup for sure to make sure that the dialogue sounds reasonable and authentic. Jim, you're up.
So Sandy's being very modest. She didn't mention that Love and Lies, Call Me Eve, won a gold medal from the Military Writers Society of America. It won a first place as a novella with the New Mexico Presswomen in 2022.
Nice.
It won a second place at the National Federation of Presswomen so it went from a statewide first place to a national second place,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a finalist in the New Mexico Arizona Book Awards in 2022. So yes,
Nice.
that is one of the main purposes of collaborating, is that each author brings with them strengths that add to the product. And as she said, as Sandy said, I bring in, well, how do guys talk when they're not with their wives? And similarly, there are situations. Keith, what's a situation you can think of that a guy would have no clue what women are talking about when they're in that situation? Got one?
Yeah, when women are talking about clothes or fashion, makeup,
Yeah,
things of
right.
that nature, and
So if you had a scene then and you needed to have that in the scene because the
mhm,
murderer had used some kind of something in the lipstick, you wouldn't know how to write that scene that would be realistic. So partnering with somebody who is of the opposite sex is a good idea if you're
right,
trying to make it realistic
mhm,
to both sexes.
exactly, and I'm supposed to be doing a collaboration with my youngest daughter because I've got one rule that if you're in one of my books, you're either going to be a victim, a killer, or a hero. And if you're a victim, I don't need your input. But if you're a hero or a killer, then you're a co-author. It's an absolute must. I think that's just the only fair thing to do, and get my daughter interested in hopefully. Um, but I haven't started that one yet. I got too many other projects I haven't even finished. All right, Sandy. Apparently, Love and Lies, that's probably one of your favorite books. Have you written others?
Yes, we have. Beyond even before, I guess. Well, where did it happen? I took a trip to Panama and came back enthused. And Jim said, "Well, shall we write about it?" And it took off from there. We added a plot to the fact that there are lots of interesting birds down there, figured out
Mm-hmm.
a way to wrap it all together, and came up with Panama's Gold, which is, again, a semi-thriller. You're not sure where the ending is gonna take you.
Mm-hmm.
At least we hope you don't know. And again, it took Jim's expertise and my covering a lot of bases in the natural history world, his in flying and how helicopters work, to make this thing be realistic and compelling, and we think a really good read.
Sounds very interesting. I'm gonna have to look that one up. I like a good thriller if there, if at all possible. Even though my genre is slasher horror. Um,
Hack.
yeah,
Sorry,
I do the
not
blood
my.
and the guts.
I'll leave yours on the shelf. I'll just wait for something that with your daughter that's a little less formidable.
Well, now the third book that I mentioned, A Sniper's Kiss. It's my first female protagonist. That one is probably the least amount of gore in it. It's got very, very little in it because I'm sorry, but how many different ways can you describe how a sniper's bullet is affecting the human body, right?
Please leave them alone. I'd like to imagine it rather than read all of the details.
Exactly. Well, I mean, but for you, if there's something in mind you wanted to read, I would probably suggest The Drunken Savior. That one I'm about 100% certain you would enjoy, and probably Jim would too. But I mean, I'm not too sure about what his taste in literature is. Jim, what other books have you written besides the two that you've collaborated with her on?
Well, let's just, before we go there, let's just remind everybody that Sandi is very, very modest, and she did not mention that Panama's Gold won a first place for novellas with the New Mexico Presswomen 2021, and then from the first place at the state level, it again went on to a national and got a second place at the national level. And it was a finalist also in the category of fiction for the Arizona Book Awards, New Mexico Arizona Book Awards in 2022. So yeah, it's those are the two major books that we have put out together. And again, going back to the theme of collaboration and how that would work, I've never been to Panama. Sandi has been to Panama. That eyes-on experience was crucial to writing this story. And she's a birder. I didn't even know what a life list was. Did I get the name right? I think I did. And now I have a life list. I mean, I may only have a few things on it, but in any case, you bring those strengths. And then she talked about helicopters. Well, I'm not a helicopter pilot. I've never well, that's not true. I actually have flown one once or twice, but not to the point where I could really do it justice. And we needed some really good scenes. We needed some chapters with some good scenes in them about flying a helicopter. So we used experts that could, technical advisors.
Right.
And those technical advisors included, in this particular case, the Marine Corps, a Navy, and an Army helicopter pilot, who had all flown that particular bird. And then we could talk about that portion, and it would be authentic. It would be absolutely authentic. Any helicopter pilot who reads it will understand totally what was written and go, yeah, that's the way it would work. And then the last piece of that need for collaboration is that neither Sandi or I live in Panama. Well, fortunately, Southwest Writers in the New Mexico area had a member who we both knew, a retired Air Force pilot, and he lives half a year in Panama.
Oh.
So he was our technical advisor, for what we couldn't see, where Sandi had not gone, but we needed to write about that. Mm-hmm. And he would be able to provide us with absolutely essential information to, again, make it very accurate. And we refer to that fellow as our unindicted co-conspirator. He's not listed as an author, but we could not have written that book without him.
Right. Well, Sandi, it seems to me like that you're extremely modest
Or forgetful.
or forgetful. I'm thinking on the modest side. You don't strike me as someone who's too forgetful. If you've written 2 books that are national award winners, I mean, I'm sorry, your eye for detail is probably outstanding, in my opinion.
It's been fun writing, and because you can remember where you've been and add to the scene, and it's almost as good as taking another trip down there.
Mm-hmm.
Or else, Eagle's Eye is another one that I wrote without Jim, and I think it holds up okay. It's the story of using the Sandia Mountains and hang gliding as a stand-in for what I was a pilot in, which was hot air ballooning.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that feeling of going with the wind rather than having control over it as you do in fixed wings.
Right.
So that was another fun piece to send out. And I think I needed Jim because it hasn't won awards yet, but I'm still hopeful.
Well, let's hope it does. I mean, because you and Jim's collaborations are great. I mean, both of them award winning. So I could not imagine that one of you written by yourself could not possibly be the same. How many books have you written on your own?
Well, a lot of short stories,
Mm-hmm.
and we've been talking about the number of books I've got. Basically just now launching into longer pieces.
Right.
Jim's the one with a real history of writing, and I think he's almost through a trilogy, which is what sort of put brakes on our collaborating because he got busy with his own stuff. And very good things as well.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. And Jim, what are you working on?
Well, I've been working on a trilogy, as Sandi said, all set in New Mexico, involving an area about 30 miles to the northwest of where I live, in the middle of the desert, with a dried up river and a number of ghost towns and ranches, and people do live there, but they're numbered in the teens, not the thousands. And it allows me as an author to be able to deviate a little bit from truth, and not too many people will know about it. For example, in the first book, Fatal Waters, I met with Sandi's husband, Richard, who is a geologist, and he was able to help me with the descriptions and the facts necessary to write about a cave that I wanted to have in there so that my main character could experience an anxiety attack. And when it was all done, he just said, well, the only problem is you can't have a cave right there. And I went, but it doesn't matter. I just moved the cave from where it could be to where I want it. And that's what you as a fiction writer can do. Right. So the first book of these trilogy is involving Fatal Waters and a threat to the community, and it also involves a lot of legal stuff, and it's got a body count of 5. So there's people who are willing to kill for this water, and why. It involves pharmaceutical companies, and I would describe it as early John Grisham. The second book in the series is the same characters who lived through the first book meet up again a few years later at a resort right in that area, and it is modeled after Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None, or 10 Little Indians. You may know it by either name.
I know it by both.
Right. And so it takes place over a weekend. It starts out on a Friday and it's over by Monday. Mm-hmm. And the body count is 7 by the time we're done. And it's same characters, but in a completely different genre. This is a straight mystery. I'm trying to entice the reader to try to figure out who did it all the way through, and then be surprised when they learn. who did it.
Right.
The third book is Fatal Blush. I'm in the outline stage only on that one. And I like to describe it as it's a vampire movie with no vampire. It's a vampire story with no vampires and no blood. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that there's something that will keep people alive. And if that's true, then people will fight and kill to get control of it. Right. And so therefore that's where I'm going to go with that third book. And that'll be the end of that series. 2 of them are done completely. And the other one is waiting for me to write it.
Oh, cool. Well, those are all 3 mysteries, correct?
They'll all be, well, they're mysteries. The second one is absolutely nothing but a mystery. Mm-hmm. The first one is more legal and mystery. Mm-hmm. But you always know who the bad guy is in that one. So it's not really a mystery per se.
Right.
Because there's nothing held back. There's nothing held back. The characters don't all know what's going on, but the reader does. And then the third one, I haven't decided whether to go down the mystery route or the fantasy route. I haven't. All I know is that the opening scene right now is a 400-year-old conquistador in the desert in New Mexico, and how is he still alive?
Very interesting book from the sounds of the way you got it outlined. Now, in my books, not to really press on too much, the killer in the first 2 books is known, but I show how they go about doing what they're doing, right? And why. And in the third book, killer is not known. So, and I put a little bit of fantasy in there, a little science fiction too. Have both of y'all just mainly write mysteries?
Oh no, Sandi, you got some great stories.
My thing started out with natural history essays, and frequently that stuff you don't discuss, which is some political opinions, and then branching out from there, personal experiences, flying right seat with my husband with our small plane, and what that's like in terms of what you see and what you experience. Mm-hmm. I don't know, it just encompassed everything from personal experience to anything I could find around the edges to talk about, because I journaled a lot all my life, and so it was carrying on from there. Both Jim and I were lucky that a friend of ours wanted to write a memoir of his life to tell his children what he had done, and he didn't know how to start, so he asked a friend who was an adjunct teacher at UNM, and she was teaching English writing, and so he said, "Would you like to join a writing group?" And I left it the chance because I felt I had a beginning understanding of what was good writing, but could certainly use any kind of help. And this was a lot simpler than having a real life course where you have to attend every week. It was a lot more fun. And so I said, yes, I'd be delighted to do that. And Jim joined at about the same time. And that was 10 years ago now, which is really hard to believe.
Very nice. And Jim, other than mysteries,
again, Sandi's being modest here. Let me just toot her horn. This is another book that we have done together, another collaboration, and it's filled with, and it just won the New Mexico Arizona Book Awards as the winner. You only have one winner, and it was the winner in the category of anthologies. And if you open it up and you see Sandi has written Give an Inch. What kind of story is that, Sandi? This is not a mystery, right?
No, it's sci-fi.
It's sci-fi. And then one of my absolute favorites, How Could I Disappear? Pure humor. The frustration of a housewife as she goes, I can't stand it anymore. I just want to escape. And I love that story. It's so good. And then she's good at comedy. There's a diva in the house. That's a great story. And it's not a mystery. And then Guardian Cactus. And I think didn't that win an award by itself, Sandi?
It did.
Yeah, it did. See, she won't tell you. I have to tell you. And then Polished with Love, which is a delightful story, a delightful end to her
Anthology.
5 stories and chapters in this book, Mirth and Musings.
And then to be really honest about this, there are 5 more great stories that Jim wrote to fill out the entire anthology. So his contribution is at least 50% as well. So his writing started out with the Navy. So we get to go back that far. Well, as he said, his pretend fake news when he was in high school. Your turn to tell him about some of the things you've done.
Yeah, considering that, he's really good about patting you on the back, but right now he ain't so good about patting himself on the back.
Oh, I've written. What I did is I wrote all through my government service. I worked for the government for 44 years, and I wrote the entire time. I was paid to write, but it was all boring academic nonfiction stuff.
Right.
I mean, my academic best-selling book was The Strategic Employment of the Soviet Navy in Nuclear War. It had 2 printings. That's unheard of in academia, but it worked. So since I stopped working, though, I have not written about anything I did when I got paid to do it, although flying stories are an exception. But I have tried all different genres in order to learn which ones I wanted to do. I needed to try them all out. And so I've written a children's book with my wife. And she's an artist, as I mentioned, and she's the illustrator of the book. And it's done very well. It's won a number of awards. And I've tried lots of different genres. I got a historical fiction set in July of 1937, a flying story. And it is not published yet, but when it gets published, I will offer it to a friend that you and I both know.
Yep, I understand. Well, there is something that all 3 of us have in common. We both love flying. All of us do. I'm not a pilot by any means, but I always wanted to be one, and I've had 5 flying lessons. I won't become a pilot because of my diabetes, unfortunately. But I would love to get back up in the air, get in control of a plane again. But I've always loved it. That's one thing we have in common. I've reached out and started playing with other genres, like just straight up mystery. I've got one I'm working on for that, and I'm doing one for science fiction and fantasy that I'm trying to do. But my main interest has always been serial killers and horror. If it can't scare the crap out of you, then and get your adrenaline pumping. To me, I find it boring unless it's action filled. If it's action filled, then there's something better. From what I can gather between the 2 of you guys, right, is most of y'all stuff that you're collaborating on has been mystery and action based. Am I wrong?
Except for the romance.
Except for the romance. I keep forgetting that one. But what would you consider to be your favorite genre to write in?
Want to take it, Sandi? You're frozen on the screen.
Oh.
And if not, I'll talk. I think we lost her.
I think
so I'll answer for Sandi a bit. She said what I think she meant earlier when she said she started out by writing about nature in our village, and she was quite good about how to describe the 4 seasons. Yeah, we lost her. It looks like she'll come back in. She'll have to accept it and come back in.
Hang on.
And so she likes those, but she also likes writing about Panama, and she's got this a sequel to our story, Panama's Gold. She's got a sequel to that. I think it's called Panama's Golden, and it has to do with a frog that's down in Panama. So that shows you where her preferences are. She likes to be able to write about nature and there's a lot of that in Panama's Gold because it's got a lot to do with volcanoes and rare earth as well as real gold.
She's showing offline on Skype.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm not going to be able to fix that.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah. In any case, she'll either join us or she won't, but I'll try to cover for her. So in my case, I love to read mysteries and thrillers. And that's what I like to read. And so that's why these three big books that I will have done, I'm not going to release till I've got all three done. That's why I preferred that genre, although each of them are slightly different. One's a straight mystery. One is not a straight mystery because you always know who is doing what. Well, there's a little bit of subterfuge and red herrings in there. But
Right.
let me talk about horror for a second, because you mentioned that's your favorite. So one of the things that I did is I took, again, as an experiment, I wrote a horror story. And I was down in San Miguel de Allende for a writing conference, and Sandi was there too, as well as some other people. My wife was there too. And we went out shopping, and we saw a Mexican mask. And that mask, as I saw it, an entire story just jumped out at me.
There you go.
A horror story. And it won a first place, and it's been published a number of times, probably about 6 different times. And because everybody who reads it, they always say, "Well, can we publish it? We don't care if it's been published before." And it's called The Mask, and it's straight horror. And I can still remember the critique I got from Sandi when I first gave it to the group to look at.
Right.
She goes, "This is really well written, but God, don't ever write anything like that again."
Yeah, well,
So I just take that as high praise. There she is. She's coming back.
Yeah.
There we
We were just talking about your critique of The Mask.
go.
That's why I don't read horror. Oh, good grief.
Well,
Right.
our common dear friend, she says the same thing about my writing. You know, she says that, you know, that I'm a good writer and I can, you know, tell a great story, but she's a weenie
That
and
makes two
she
of
doesn't like
us.
reading my
There's-
stuff, but she does.
Yeah. You can find enough scary things in real life. You don't have to go hunt for them.
Well, that is
That's
true,
Um,
but sometimes the
I have to
imagination.
say that
I'm
right
sorry.
now I'm more attracted to comedy than anything else. I think as a compensation for what we're facing out in the world. You know,
Oh.
all the things that seem stressful.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
that's a good genre to write in for guys, because let's face it, the only emotions that guys come to naturally is going to be anger and humor.
pretty
The
much.
rest of them we have to work hard at. So one of my goals when I first started writing, I've got a PTSD diagnosis, and I didn't want to write about the bad stuff. I didn't want to write about what gave me PTSD, what was the
Right.
triggering the trauma. I wanted to write something that would make me laugh, and the other veterans who belong to the VA writing group that I go to every week. And it was, you know, I'd sit there and I'd write something totally ridiculous, you know, like how much do these running shoes cost, or why did they invent pink duct tape? And if I could get the vets to smile and laugh during our 2-hour meeting, I went, that's pretty good, because, you know, for these guys, that might be the only time that they laugh this entire week.
Exactly.
So humor's a good thing to write, and I still dabble at it. I still do it. I did one about the COVID and how it had affected me, and it. I think Richard, Sandi's husband, Richard, when he read it, he sent me a little note saying, "My God, I can't believe, you know, you went through all this going to a hospital." And I went, "Yeah, that's why I wrote about it, because it was absolutely insane."
Yeah.
And I love going over the top then, you know, and making it even more absurd.
I've not tried comedy yet. I probably will at some point in time. It's just that comedy is not one of my major interests. Oh, hang on a second. Sorry about that. Well, unfortunately, our time is pretty much expired. And this has been a wonderful interview, people. You know, Sandi, great to finally see you. And, you know, Jim, you know, y'all are a great collaborator, great authors on your own rights. And you work great together. So, in final, I would like both of you to give us a closing.
I think Sandi's frozen again. I don't see her moving.
Nope, she's off.
Yeah. So I'll close for Sandi and say she's very pleased to have been here, and she's working very hard on the follow-on to Panama's Gold. And she appreciates, as do I, having been here today with your listeners and viewers, and invite you to look us up on. We're both listed on Amazon or Goodreads, and see what we've written, and see if any of it. You might even want to read the strategic employment of the Soviet Navy in nuclear war. Okay.
Only if you read a technical book that I co-authored on AutoCAD.
All right, we can do swapsies, huh?
Exactly. All right, Jim. It was great having you guys on here. All right, people, this has been R.K. Mullins, author of Time for a Serial Killer, Confessions Before Death, A Sniper's Kiss, and the Drunken Savior. And your host, as always, this redneck hillbilly hosting Authored Authors, where we've had Jim Tritten and Sandi Hoover today. Both great authors and working together as co-authors. So hopefully we're going to have them on here again, especially when Jim publishes that trilogy. As always, people, it's been my pleasure. Y'all come back, you hear?